I'm Elizabeth Lofstad with the San Diego County Water Authority, and this is our 5th Water Use Efficiency Standard workshop. These workshops are really kind of designed to take some of the issues that are being tackled throughout the month and kind of drill down on them, look at what the state is proposing, look at some of the alternative proposals, and then see if we can come up with tips and tricks and ways that we can respond to that. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Michelle, and she's going to go over the agenda.
Great. Thank you, Elizabeth, and welcome everyone. We're happy to be back. And we've got some great overviews today. So again, the meetings continue, the information continues to come out. And so we're going to dive into a little bit about the standards. Elizabeth will be covering that. We'll be doing a little bit on the variances, and that will be covered by Jessica. Then we're going to have CII and a little bit of the SIMUS overview, spatial SIMUS, and that will be covered by Efren. And then I will be covering the Excel tool. If you did come to our previous workshop, Nate Adams presented that, and we're going to continue that. So that's going to be a big portion of our workshop today, is a hands-on workshop using the tool, getting you familiar with it and the data. And at a minimum, you can learn where to find some of the key information that you're going to be using. It's very, very draft. All of this information is still coming out, but it's a good starting point. So we're going to be going over that and discussing it. You will have a choice of 3 rooms, so you can be thinking of that. The first room is, I don't have my data, and where should I get it? Or help me find some of it. Or you have data questions in general. The second room will be, I have my data, but I haven't run the tool. And the third one is, I've run the tool and I'm ready to kind of discuss it. So you can be thinking about that. You will be able to join the breakout rooms and float between rooms as well. So we'll have a good discussion there. Then we will also do a share out from all of those breakout rooms and kind of talk about what happened during those breakout rooms. And then last but not least, we'll have a wrap up. So with that, next slide. So many of you have been to our webinars in the past, but just especially since we're doing breakout rooms, it'd be great to rename yourself. And if you're willing to put your agency, so as we're discussing in small groups, we can kind of know who else is with us and who's speaking. That's kind of helpful. And then if you want to, please turn on your camera when you're speaking in the breakout room. It's nice to talk to a face and not, black squares with a name, but if you're not comfortable, that's fine too, but it'd be great to connect. Please be aware of your background noise. We are doing this on Zoom so we can talk and have live discussions. They're very, very helpful for breakout rooms, but we can also get background noise. So please mute yourself if you're not talking. And then there is the chat feature. We will be monitoring that. And then if you want to ask a question, just let us know, and then we'll hopefully have enough time. We'll have a little bit of time for Q&A as we go throughout. So we've got a great session lined up for you. We're really happy that you were able to join us today. And with that, this is I said this earlier verbally, but I wanted to say it again, say it twice. So here it is in writing. If you don't know the data, you're going to pick out breakout room 1. If you found the data but don't know how to use it in the model, you're going to want breakout room number 2. And then you found the data and you've run the model as your breakout room number 3. We'll have 2 people in each room to kind of work with you on the tool, and we should hopefully have a really great dynamic discussion there. And again, you can move between rooms at any time. So hopefully we'll have a great discussion today. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Elizabeth, and she is going to give us the standards overview.
Sorry, I was muted. I'm just going to give a brief overview of some of the standards. We have a presentation on variances. We have a presentation on the commercial, industrial, and institutional. And so I'm going to focus a little bit on where we are with the indoor and the outdoor. And then just kind of have a little brief discussion about some of the outdoor impacts that the standards might have. So next slide, please. This is just our timeline. October 21 is coming really soon. DWR at that time is supposed to give a complete package to the state board with recommendations on indoor residential water use, outdoor residential water use, variances and bonuses, and CII BMPs. DWR is starting to kind of say that deadline will probably not be met. They're trying to get it between, November or December this year. So we've seen a lot of slippage in these dates. So it's not really surprising. One of the things that they brought up is that, the state board is still working on their water loss standard. And so in order to have a complete picture of what the standard is going to be and the water use objective is going to be, you kind of have to have that water loss piece in there as well. And so that's part of the challenge as well. So next slide, please. Just some dates coming up. Indoor standard, there was a July 19th DWR workshop. In that workshop, if you were able to attend it, or if you weren't, the DWR back in April and May of this year released their initial proposal for indoor standards. It's dropping the indoor standards down to 52.5 in 2025, and I'm sorry, not from 52.5 in 2025 to 47 in 2025, and then from 50 in 2030 to 42 in 2030. This workshop that they had on the 19th really kind of focused on how agencies could meet that standard and how it might impact them. And so what we've heard is that they're going to do the final report in August, and we don't really anticipate a whole lot of changes to their recommendation at this point. So it's still to be seen, but what they've said is there's not going to be any more workshops. They've done their stakeholder process and they're ready to finalize that report. And that report is going to the legislature, and then legislation will have to be put into place to actually change the indoor standards. For the outdoor standards, there was a June 30th standards methodology work group meeting. What they're looking at is an ET adjustment factor of 0.7. And then in the legislation, it says that the outdoor water use should be based on irrigable landscape area. But they are proposing kind of a little bit in conflict with that legislation is that they would do irrigable, not irrigated. They would use that as a buffer instead of including it in your target every time. And they're only going to use 20% of it as a buffer. So I'm going to go kind of more into depth on that outdoor standards and what that means and what the proposal is. They have scheduled another workshop for August 25th. That one should look at the landscape area measurements and what changes were made, and have those came out and maybe discuss those standards as well. Water loss performance standards, we're still waiting for that to come out. And then we were supposed to get a draft guidance document on a water supply and demand assessment in July. That has not come out. So it's kind of a question mark, well, we'll have that August workshop. That has not been put on the calendar either. So again, we kind of have a lot of these dates are still tentative. Next slide, please. So this is just kind of a summary slide. Some of you have probably heard me make this presentation several times. What are we recommending? And again, I'm just kind of focused on the indoor and outdoor and the water supply and demand assessment, variances, and commercial, industrial, and institutional will be covered by Jessica and Efren later. For the indoor standard, we really think that some additional study needs to be done. And the big concern there is cost. Not only cost to really implement and meet the indoor standard, but cost of on water, wastewater, and recycled water facilities, and how reducing the indoor water use is going to impact those facilities, and what is going to be the long-term impact on that. Outdoor standards, we just really think that we need to look at hydrology, and we need to make sure that we're not forcing people to make drastic changes in landscape. Water use efficiency is making sure that we're maintaining what we have at an efficient rate. And so that's one of the concerns that we have. And then finally, water supply and demand. We did provide some sample reports. We have discussed previously voluntary reporting that really kind of has not moved forward, but it's something we're still kind of discussing with DWR off and on. And so we'll see how that goes. Next slide, please. So looking at the outdoor water use requirements, this is just kind of like water use 101, and I'm sure there's people on the phone that know this stuff a lot better than I do. But for those of you that are, maybe new to this or are just learning budgets, this is kind of like outdoor water budgets 101. You need your ET factor, and it's basically how much water that plants need to grow and be healthy. And then you have irrigation requirements, and it's based on how much water that the plant needs, and then it's also how good the irrigation system is. Basically, no irrigation system is 100% effective. It's going to get every single drop where it needs to be to really make plants grow. And so that's one of the concerns we have with DWR assumptions is what are they assuming for those the efficiency of the irrigation system. Plant factors are how much each different type of plant needs. So you kind of see here's different plant types listed, what kind of plant type factor they have. So if you have desert type plants, you're only going to have a plant factor of 0.3. You're going to need less water. If you have vegetable crops, you're going to need a plant factor of 1. So you're going to need some more water. If you have turf, you're going to have a plant factor of 0.8. So depending on what is already planted in the ground, and again, we're looking at houses across the state and existing development that has been in place for a very long time. Not everybody has the xeriscape or water smart landscaping. Making those changes are a big investment. And so while we encourage people to do that and incentivize people to do that, we also need to make sure that we recognize what the standard is, that watering a lawn that exists efficiently does not necessarily mean you're going to be able to meet a very low ET standard. Next slide, please. So one of the things you have to look at is how efficient is your irrigation system? Drip and low flow systems are 70 to 95% efficient. So those are really efficient. But most of us know that not all landscaping is irrigated by drip and low flow systems. A lot of people, especially families, have yards where their kids play or their dogs play or whatever, and they have overhead spray. It's been, put in for decades and decades and decades. It's kind of the norm. And so overhead spray has an efficiency of between 50 and 75%. So DWR's proposal and the way they're kind of calculating their number is they're assuming that irrigation efficiency ranges is about 80%. So that's a pretty high number that they're using. So they're really kind of leaning more towards that drip and low flow and less of that overhead spray. And again, that's not necessarily the long-term, that's not what may not be existing in most houses. Most houses were built before 1993, and they may not have drip and low flow systems there. So looking at these ET example factors, one really simple one is, you have turf and you have overhead spray at 0.6 efficiency. You're going to need 1.3 of ET to make sure that your lawn stays healthy. That's what you're going to need. Now, when DWR did their calculations, they cut out that anything that was over 1 for ET adjustment factor. So again, that might be kind of excluding some people that are doing the best they can with the systems that they have. And while we want to increase efficiency, we also want to make sure that we're keeping our eye on things like cost effectiveness and the long-term impact of what we're doing. Next slide, please. So what I have here is, DWR's proposal and what Aqua's been proposing, and a lot of water agencies have kind of been working on this and looking at this and trying to figure out, what makes sense. And, DWR currently proposes a 0.7 factor for all irrigable and irrigated areas. Aqua is proposing 0.8 for irrigable areas that are irrigated with potable water. And then there are for recycled water in special landscape areas. So again, this is like parks that are, have people playing ball on them, or there's, soccer, or they have heavy uses. And so they might need a little extra water. DWR is keeping all of those at 0.7. These special landscape areas were not included in their analysis. So these higher water use areas were not included. So that's a concern. So we're looking at, let's be consistent with MWILO, which has them at a 1.0. And then we have irrigable, not irrigated. Again, irrigable is what is listed in the legislation. And so DWR is proposing to give 20% of that as a buffer, only if you do not meet your standard, and that would be at a 0.7. And Aqua is proposing to do that at a 0.55 ET factor. And the thought with that is that it's going to be new landscaping, whether it's replacing a dead lawn or it's a new home. You're probably going to be more efficient. You're going to be able to have more efficient devices. Again, it accounts for the efforts that we've made as a water industry to really encourage new development to be more water efficient. Again, recycled water in special landscaped areas, we would keep those at 1. And then if you need an additional variance for flushing salts for high TDS recycled water, that's going to be handled through the variance process. So we propose that 100% of the irrigable area be included, and that if for some reason the irrigable area for an agency is too high, these things should be looked at every 5 years or so. And then we assume that irrigation efficiency, and this has been, we've had looked at several different reports and studies, and an average irrigation efficiency assumption is 0.6 and not that 0.8 that DWR is doing. Next slide, please. So what we're looking for an overall formula for DWR on the left there, they're looking at 0.7 times irrigated area, and then 0.7 times 0.2 times irrigable area. And that's going to be your standard. So you're basically only going to get 14% of your irrigable area, and then you're going to get 70% of your ET applied to your irrigated area. Aqua's counter proposal and the water agency's proposal is to keep it at 0.8 for all irrigated areas, have special landscape areas at 1.0, and then for any irrigable, not irrigated currently areas, you put that down at the lower 0.5. Next slide, please. So that's what we're kind of looking at for the outdoor standards. So our goal in this meeting today is to really kind of look at where everybody's kind of standing, and we're going to play with that model, and you might want to see, hey, what happens if I have an 80% of ET factor or a 70% ET factor? How does that change my numbers? And are there concerns that you might have? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to, I believe, Jessica. She's going to go over variances. Unless, I'm sorry, do we have any questions? Anything?
Any questions from the group? I don't see anything in the chat at the moment either, so.
Okay. All right, Jessica.
Good. All right, great. Thank you so much. Everybody can hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, thank you. All right, well, there's quite a bit to cover on this topic, so I'll go ahead and jump right into it if you want to advance to the next slide, please. So the AB 1668 and SB 606 required that variances and a potable reuse bonus incentive be included for water suppliers' water use objective. There were 8 variances called out in the legislation. However, there was also a statement that the state isn't limited to just those other variances. Next slide, please. However, at this time, DWR has moved forward with the 8 that were in the legislation, and those are horses and livestock, dust control, evaporative coolers, seasonal populations, supplemental use for sustaining wildlife, fire and emergency use, agriculture, and areas irrigated with high TDS recycled water. Next slide. So first we'll go into the horses and livestock. DWR is currently proposing to limit this variance to livestock that are over 200 pounds. And they've presented 2 methods to calculate the variance. The first is a statewide average, allowing 8 gallons per animal per day. And this would require that the water use makes up at least 5% of a water supplier's urban water use objective. So each of these variances have what they've determined to be a threshold in order to qualify for the variance. There is a concern using the statewide average approach because both horses and cattle require more like 12 gallons per animal per day. And there's a pretty good likelihood that those are more likely to make up a bigger portion of the livestock over 200 pounds on residential parcels. So the 8 gallons seems pretty low. The second method that the states proposed to calculate this variance would be using animal type and local climate adjustment. So a water supplier would not only have to have the amount of large livestock in their service area, but also the type of animals that they are. And then of course, provide their local climate data. And this would reduce the threshold down to 3%. Next, we have dust control. And DWR has determined that dust control for the purposes of construction and on vacant lots is excluded for this variance. Instead, they've chosen to focus on corral areas. And in water suppliers landscape area measurement that they received from the state, there's also a mask layer for corrals. So you already have that information. And the way that would be calculated would be to allow about a 1/4 inch of water to be applied to that area 2 to 4 times a week, depending on a water supplier's climate zone. And the threshold for this variance is proposed at 5%. Next. Next, we have evaporative coolers, and evaporative cooler use is probably more concentrated and more relevant for specific geographic areas. The states also acknowledge that there may be a disadvantaged community relationship there, but they haven't been able to elaborate much on that. In general, there's very limited data on this variance, and they've only performed analysis for one utility. So because they have such limited data, they haven't actually developed a formula to determine efficient use of evaporative coolers. And they've put out a request, an information request to water suppliers, or if anyone does have any information or access to studies or data that can help them determine what efficient evaporative cooler use looks like, to please reach out to them, and I'll be sharing their contact information in a later slide. For seasonal populations, so this is in regards to the indoor GPCD allowance that a water supplier has. And for those who have larger seasonal populations, they might not be getting that GPCD allowance for that population. So 3 methods that the state has presented in order to qualify for this variance would be first a monthly water use, using monthly water use data. And because this one would have the highest margin of error, it also has the highest threshold requirements to qualify. And that is at least 40% of your accounts appear to be seasonal use, or at least 15% of your total water use. The next is using the daily or hourly energy use. So of course, water suppliers would have to work with their energy providers on this one to get the energy data. And that would bring down the threshold to at least 25% of accounts presenting to be seasonal populations, or at least 10% of a supplier's total use. And lastly, using daily or hourly water use data for those suppliers who have access to that data, and that brings down the threshold to 20% of accounts, or 5% of total use. Next. Next is supplemental water for sustaining wildlife. So DWR did specify that this needs to be intentional, paid for use, not incidental runoff from irrigation that's providing supplemental water to a pond that happens to be sustaining wildlife. And the variance itself would be calculated just tied to the evaporative loss of the water. And the 3 options that the state has presented is first, that a water supplier could qualify based on having legal or regulatory requirements for that water feature, pond, lake, whatever it might be. It has to be there as a result of legal or regulatory requirements. The second option is more flexible and would be that it's there for either like legal or regulatory requirements or private requirements, which would include HOAs. And the last option is actually to remove this as a variance and instead require dedicated irrigation meters for these areas, and that they would fall under those standards. Next is fire and emergency use. So this is only for water used during wildfire or water loss due to an earthquake. What does not qualify for this variance is water used on areas as a method of fire prevention. It's only during an active emergency. So a water supplier could receive pre-approval, say they're in a really high risk area and they want to get pre-approved ahead of the year for this additional water use, or they can do an emergency petition, which would be after the fact. The idea here is not necessarily for water use efficiency. DWR did acknowledge that, during emergencies, water use efficiency might not be the main priority there. Instead, it's safety. So instead, the variance would just be tied to how much water was used would be the variance amount. There are still threshold requirements here, though. So that would be that the emergency affected at least 5% of the residential area, or at least 10% of the supplier's accounts, or at least 8% of their water use. And by qualifying for this variance, it also grants suppliers additional time and data flexibility when it comes to submitting their water use objective data for that year. Next slide. For agriculture, DWR has said that the efficient use for this variance will only be considered during the growing season, meaning that water suppliers might not get that additional variance amount year round. And the three methods that the state has proposed to calculate this variance would be first using a statewide average approach. So this would use a set growing season across the entire state and regardless of crop type. And because this would have the highest margin of error and has the least level of detail involved, it has the highest threshold at 10% of an urban water use objective. Next would be supplier specific, meaning that the supplier could provide their climate data to the state. And that way the growing season could be based on their local climate data, and it would reduce the threshold to 8%. And finally, the detailed approach incorporates local climate data and crop data and reduces the threshold to 5%. But of course, the water supplier needs to be able to provide the crop data for their service area. Next slide, please. Finally, we'll discuss high TDS recycled water and the potable reuse bonus incentive. So currently, DWR is proposing to classify high TDS recycled water as that is above 1,200. And this is just based on a statistical average across the state. And what stakeholders pointed out at the last meeting was that just because that's the statistical average in the state isn't necessarily what's high TDS as far as plant health is concerned. So DWR did acknowledge that and said that they would consider revising this the standard to take into account more horticultural best practices and for plant health. The three methods that they're presenting to calculate this variance would be first using a constant ETAF of that. Again, just like the other ones, it's the least specific, so it has the highest threshold to qualify at 10%. Next would be variable based on a water supplier's local climate data, and that reduces the threshold to 8%. And then finally, using that variable ETAF plus the plant type. So again, the water supplier would have to be able to provide the additional information of what types of plants are being irrigated with this high TDS water, and that would reduce their threshold to only 5% to qualify. And lastly, the potable reuse bonus incentive. So the legislation calls out that the maximum adjustments that can be made for this are 15% for existing facilities or 10% for new facilities. And initially there were 4 methods presented to calculate this variance. However, option 1 and option 2B were the least popular. Option 1 because it required the most amount of work for the least amount of bonus incentive, and option 2B just because it applied to the fewest water suppliers. So the state's moving forward considering option 2 and option 2A. And those are the last in first out approach is referring to getting credit for the potable reuse water that's entering your system. You get credit for that amount of water. The option 2A would be that water suppliers who are not meeting their water loss objective would also have to have whatever their water loss percent is that's been determined through their annual water audits, have that applied to that potable reuse water so they don't get full credit for it. One note on this, there is at least one stakeholder, not water suppliers, but from another organization, who's advocating that all water suppliers should have to have this water loss component factored into their potable reuse water, regardless of whether they're meeting the water loss objective or not. Water reuse, California is advocating against that because, as we'll see when we actually get into the model, water loss is already factored in. We wouldn't want to factor that in twice, and we certainly wouldn't want to do something that reduces the incentive to create more potable reuse opportunities. Next slide, please. So looking forward, DWR has suspended the regularly scheduled variance meetings at this time. So they are, they're not sure if they're going to have another meeting. They did acknowledge that there's still lots of room for engagement and comments, and requested that comments and feedback be sent to their email, the WUWI standards@water.ca.gov email, especially if you have any information that can help them with, on the ground experience that you've seen as a water supplier, or anything to help them kind of fine tune the data they have, and especially the areas where they're lacking some of that information. In the meantime, some of the messages that we can continue to share is to stress the importance of accessibility for these variances for water suppliers, maintaining a simplified approach, and also reasonable thresholds. I'm sure some of you noticed that some of the thresholds here are quite high. And there's some concern over the equitability for all water suppliers, because not everybody has the resources to provide these really high level details that they're asking for in order to qualify for the variances at the lower thresholds. And that could prevent water suppliers from qualifying for them, even though they have significant use in these areas, and they should be able to qualify, especially if they're willing to put in, work to qualify. They should be able to. Next slide, please. So that was my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions or take any comments you might have for me today. And if anything comes up in the future and you want to reach out, my contact information is right there. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. So any questions for Jessica? I don't see anything at the chat at this time, but does anyone want to ask a live question to Jessica about variances?
Actually, I do. This is, this is Teresa from Santa Fe Irrigation. I understand that they have suspended the variance. Is there any thought behind maybe sending a letter from from the San Diego region in general? I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but some of these thresholds are ridiculous, and some of the information they're asking for is ridiculous. There's just no way that they can put this information out here in July and August and then say, well, if you'd like to change this threshold, please provide us with data. Like, for small districts, it's just impossible to turn that information around. Excuse me. And I'm also a little bit frustrated, again, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, the makeup of some of these groups. Like, it's frustrating to me to see these large agencies like MWD and East Bay Med and Irvine Ranch, people who have significant conservation teams, people who have, districts who have 5 or 6 people who work for them in their conservation section, saying this is overwhelming to us and it's impossible for small districts. I mean, at this point, for my district, what I need DWR to tell me is what's the fine that my district's going to have to pay, so I can start building that into my rate structure. And if they're not going to be willing to listen to us, then it's kind of like, what's the point of this? And I'd rather just have my board write a letter saying, we're disappointed in DWR or whatever. So has anyone thought about that? Like, can we send a group letter? I mean, I know letters are letters, but just some of it, even just like for the horse corrals, like, it's just very frustrating. And a lot of it is going to be very cost intensive for districts to implement, for us to reach out to people, and then for people on the ground, like customers, they're going to have to change their habits. It's going to cost them money. I mean, some of this is really just impossible to meet. And if they're not willing to even have meetings about it anymore, what are we doing here?
Teresa, this is Elizabeth, and I think that if we want to send a letter, we can certainly get together and put together a letter and send that in. What we've found to be a little bit more effective is meeting kind of almost one-on-one with DWR staff. And so if you're interested, and if there's anyone else on the line that's interested, that's looking at these variances saying, hey, they would really apply to our area, but we just don't have any way to get the information that DWR is looking for, or it's going to cost us a lot to get the information that DWR is looking for, or anything that they want comments on. If you guys could just reach out to me, and I would be happy to set up a meeting with DWR staff and just kind of go through some of these issues. And that has been the most effective way to kind of communicate with them. It's just kind of a behind the scenes meeting, and they are interested in hearing from small agencies, but unfortunately, the way the things that are set up in the stakeholder meetings, and I mean, there's so many meetings, it's really difficult for agencies that don't have a lot of staff to really kind of attend and follow all of this stuff. So yeah, so if you're interested in that, and Teresa, I can set something up. And if anyone else is interested as well, either stick a note in the chat or just contact me on the side.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I really appreciate that. And I definitely would be interested in that. I've reached out a couple times, and the other thing is, the way they're doing some of these lists and the way they send things out, it's just not like I'm included in some meetings, but not included in others. And you're exactly right. Considering everything else that's going on, it's really hard to keep track of what they're doing, but also, yeah, it's just very frustrating. And so I'm starting to get a lot of pressure from my board. And I mean, we're looking at like a 20% cut right now, while we're also telling people we're going to go into allocations. And it's not great. And I understand that they're theorists and they need some boots on the ground people, but I think they also need to understand some of their formulas just don't make sense. I know we're supposed to be efficient, but what they're talking about is just near impossible. So I do think that they need to just be prepared. What are the fines? And we can just build those into our rates.
Yeah. Well, we don't want to go down that road. We don't yet. We're still trying to get them to change. So yeah, I'll put together, I see people that are interested in joining in, and I will put together a side meeting, and we'll kind of meet and hash out some of our, the concerns, and then I'll see which staff at DWR would be appropriate to meet with, if that sounds good to you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And it looks like
this is Lisa Madas. I just wanted to offer too, DWR seems to be really receptive to, bringing solutions. Like when you say it doesn't work, if you have any suggestions on what would work, and I know they're really closely listening to Aqua, and because those committees are working and trying to flesh out solutions, because if you remember how the law was set up, they're supposed to come with recommendations. So the more that you can help them frame those recommendations with what would work is, I agree with Elizabeth, why they're really listening kind of one-on-one, and they're doing their best. I think they're just not practitioners. They don't see what you see. So I would really, I know if you don't have data or time to research things, but even if you understand your water data or, basis for the why and what would work for thresholds you mentioned seem really high. If you can come with what thresholds, would be reasonable or could work or whatever. I mean, they're in this space to make a recommendation. The other alternative is the state board decides. So I just wanted to offer, what I have heard from, I know Elizabeth's probably hearing from DWR staff too, is please come with pragmatic ideas. We need to hear them.
Okay. So, and that's helpful. The other thing is, there's what I can provide data for, but then there's also the social norms that exist over that. And I think that that's something that's being left out of it. Like I can tell people, we're horse country up here. I can tell people your horse should be using 8 gallons per day. And they're going to say, yeah, no, I fill up a 30-gallon drum and I dump it out at the end of the day and I refill it. Should that be more efficient? Sure. But how am I going to tell someone you can use 8 gallons today? Like, that's just not reasonable. So how do I factor in, like, they need to take into account like kind of a social norm, like a social behavioral change, but also at the same time, you know, it would also be nice if they could think of larger methods if they want some of this data. Like if the state could enter into a procurement contract with, say, like Springbrook. A lot of us use Springbrook to do our billing cycles, to do tracking of our data. If they could do like a large contract with Springbrook that we could all be a part of, so that they could help us to track some of that information and maybe come up with a different process or a different, a different way of calculating information that the state can kind of manage, that we could all join up with, even that would be more helpful. But some of what they're asking for is extremely time intense. And even if it makes sense, like I should be able to pull meter data and tell you exactly how much, water people are using on a daily basis. It's not like that.
Mhm.
And so I don't know how to, like, I can come with data, but it's hard for me to come with data when I don't know what they know and I don't know what they don't know, which I understand is difficult, but I think what they need to understand also a little bit more is, while they're putting a practical approach to this, water is an emotional issue, and it's really hard to put a practical, theoretical, data-driven approach to something that is emotional, if that makes sense.
Well, I heard you bringing up great quantities and great ideas, like 30 gallons for horse per day, and here's why. I mean, I would just say, these are things that I don't know that DWR has heard directly. Maybe they already have, but the more examples they have, the louder the voices, and concert of voices on this topic, even, volumetric quantity things you can bring up and think through, like, this is the policy that would work for me on horses. This is what I can tell horse owners. This is how they could be more efficient, a little more efficient. This is what their practice is now, and this is already efficient, or whatever it is. I just think you framing that up would be so helpful to them.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, and good discussion on that. I see Gabriella Olson, you've raised your hand, and thank you for being patient. I've seen you raise it twice. So go ahead, we'd love to hear your question.
I just wanted to echo what Teresa just said, but I wanted to add one thing. So we sat on the residential ag work group that they had for the districts. There was only 2 districts in there, in that residential ag group where they were taking comments. And so that was a little frustrating. I mean, it gets back to what Teresa was saying, they want to hear, but then they don't put that information out for people to actually be involved. And I know one of the things when they were talking about the variances and the crop data, we really said that the small districts, if they have that data and DWR has crop data, they should put that out so we can use that. And then if districts want to gather their own data, and they have the resources, that's fine. But at least for the small agencies, we could already use data that DWR already has. So I think sharing the data that they have with the agencies would really be helpful too.
Yeah, that's a great point. I like that.
Of course, we didn't hear
I like
anything
that
back
too.
from them though when we made that comment.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think they're inundated with comments. I would keep making it. It was a great comment. Keep it up.
Thank you.
And just because you don't hear anything back immediately, sometimes they can include that into their next round of whatever they're thinking. So
Great. All right. Well, great discussion. I'm glad we found a topic that's spurring some discussion. With that, there are a lot of people that want to join your group, Elizabeth. So we're going to save the chat for you and get your group that wants to meet with DWR together. And that's great as well. So with that, thank you, Jessica, for your variances overview. We're going to move on to 2 topics by Efren. He's going to talk about the CII performance measures, and then we're also going to talk about CIMMYS data. So I'll turn over to Efren.
Great, thank you so much, Michelle. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Efren Lopez, I'm a water resource specialist in the water use efficiency team. And today I will be providing an update on the CII standards and the performance measures that were proposed by DWR. Specifically, I will be going over the preliminary white paper released by DWR. Next slide, please. A CII white paper was prepared by Medal's Water Management for DWR It's titled Preliminary Draft, a noted outline in literature review, summary of technical best management practices for commercial, industrial, and institutional water use. Aqua and the CII work group provided comments to DWR, and I will go over those in the presentation. Next slide, please. Under roles and responsibilities, the Aqua work group recommended that DWR define those roles and responsibilities. Specifically, what are the roles of DWR, the State Water Resources Control Board, and water suppliers. Furthermore, DWR should recognize the limitations that water suppliers have when they are asked to require and enforce CII customers to participate in these performance measures. DWR should also describe further the relationship that exists between the volume of water that is used by the CII sector versus the typical percentage of CII accounts for suppliers. DWR notes that a larger portion of water consumption comes from top users. The easier water conservation becomes, it can be if you target these top users. And the work group would like DWR to note that top water users can also be very efficient despite using large volumes of water. A top user is not necessarily, suggestive of water waste. And one example we provided was a restaurant with very high water use because it was a very popular restaurant, and it could have simply a greater number of customers, more popularity, and despite having made investments in water use efficiency, it's still using a lot of water. And this seems to be true for most high use and CII facilities where volume of production or users help drive water use. We recommend that DWR should revise the statements listed and acknowledge that there is a difference between high water use that's efficient versus high water use that's wasteful. Next slide, please. So the section on audits and surveys and water management plan, that indicates that water management plans are expected to be widely used or even potentially required. However, the group noted that careful considerations needs to be given to the feasibilities for water suppliers of different sizes and different resources to conduct these audits and water management plans. The group knows that audits and water management plans can be very useful and one of the primary tools in water suppliers to help improve water use efficiency, but mandatory thresholds for suppliers to conduct these audits and water management plans may create, infeasible burdens on the agencies. Completing and consulting with customers on audits and water management plans, you might know they require significant staff resources, as we just heard from many of you. And rather than require water suppliers to conduct audits or water management plans, DWR should focus on providing guidance to water suppliers to water saving recommendations based on these audits. DWR's definition of goal of a water management plan is to provide a framework for CII facilities to monitor, measure, and report water efficiency progress. Again, DWR should recognize that water suppliers have authority to require customers to implement recommendations from an audit or a water management plan. You can provide it, but they don't have to follow through with it. And water suppliers, what we've heard from the group is they should not be required to meet regulatory requirements that are outside of your control. We also recommended that under specify different types of customers in the sector, when referencing categories of customers, DWR should ensure that the report aligns and is consistent with the proposed classification systems for CII. Many suppliers already use and have templates that were tailored specifically for their service area. DWR, we recommend, should allow suppliers to keep using these templates. Additionally, DWR should even consider using these models for their own model as a template. And the group also considers that having third-party verifications can be very costly for an agency. Next slide, please. And then continuing on with the comments and proposals, the California Water Code requires that DWR, in coordination with the state board, make recommendations on BMPs. These can include audits and water management plans, and to do relevant studies and research and include our stakeholder feedbacks, such as BMPs. And the group recommends that DWR should continue conducting these studies before providing recommendations. DWR's goal for a flexible approach by perhaps different state thresholds on sizes and of agencies, and having flexibility to leverage a list of approved BMPs be made available that are appropriate to the service area. It is assumed that basic reporting on activity level would occur when other reporting is already being collected. We recommend that DWR should clarify the scope of the reporting that's anticipated for these performance measures. Additionally, we recommend that DWR take into consideration the supplier's currently existing BMPs that are specific to their service area. The group also notes that audits may be conducted on several factors. When you conduct an audit, it comes from many different sources. It could come from a customer request. It could come as a requirement of a rebate program, leaks. So DWR should really look into other thresholds for BMPs, audits, and water management plans besides the current proposals. Next slide, please. The white paper also includes a sample dot matrix of best management descriptions. The group considered, recommending to DWR, and they wrote in the letter to define how various categories are evaluated. You have water saving potentials, cost effectiveness, and interest from stakeholders, and the time are all really vague terms whose evaluation is relative when compared to the supplier perspective versus the customer perspective. So under education, you have education provides the backbone for any conservation program. And while we know that Aqua and the group recognize that educational programs are very important, but they would like DWR to recognize that education classes require significant resources, again, to develop and to launch. One example was provided by the city of Santa Rosa. They had to hire an outside consultant to develop workshops for their customers because time required to develop the curriculum, the marketing, and hosting the classes was just very time intensive, and they didn't have those resources. Under policy and legislation, they identify youth influence with government and HOAs to promote conservation policies and legislation. Again, the group noted that these policy efforts, such as ordinances, take a very long time to finalize under normal conditions. So we recommend that DWR consider the ability to effectively develop, implement, and enforce any policy that may be more, and any policy efforts that can become more difficult versus, municipality efforts. And finally, you have a conservation contracts. Figure 1 again recommends utilities to meet conservation targets with financial penalties for not meeting these targets, build requirements for water-wise landscape ordinances, tiered rates, and so on into contracts with utilities. But the group noted that this may be very difficult to implement. DWR should clarify whether this should be considered in an enforcement action between the supplier and the customer. Next slide, please. And finally, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this moment, or you can follow up with an email. If you don't have the white paper, we'd be happy to email you that so you can, refer back to what I just presented on. I don't see any questions, so we'll move on to the next slide. I'm going to give you a brief overview of the California irrigation.
Hey, Efren, just real quick.
Yeah.
Hey, and I just want to let you guys all know that we have a great opportunity because we have both Lisa and Michelle on,
exactly.
with us today, and they're actually working on these BMPs. And so, as you're looking at your portfolio of commercial programs and what might be feasible to have as a BMP, I think, this is great opportunity to provide feedback.
Exactly.
Hey, Elizabeth, sorry, I have a quick question for you. For the CII, is that including like schools as well, whether they be high schools, middle schools, or colleges? Is that considered CII as well?
Most of the time, those are considered institutional.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
I have a comment about the BMPs for CII. This is Teresa again. The one thing, and I know that there had been an initial meeting and someone had made a comment about this, I think someone from Northern California, when you're looking at your commercial properties, specifically ones that are not sub-metered, it is really difficult to be able to determine if there's ever a transfer of business. So like we just had a situation where there used to be like a dog food store or something, and now they're talking about putting a restaurant in they're like going to blow out a couple of different places. And so when you're calculating your commercial use, that is not necessarily, water districts don't know that. We don't necessarily know if there's been a change of ownership, especially if it's like a strip mall and everyone's just on 1 meter and the landlord just kind of doles everyone out. So if there's something, I know that's part of like the reasonable and, reporting methods, but there has to be something, again, that's kind of like that. What's the practical approach to it? There's some things that on the commercial side are very difficult to know unless each business has its own sub-meter, and that's not necessarily a financial possibility for some of these businesses that we have, because businesses don't have the ability to pay $10,000 to $15,000 per meter if they have 30 places within their strip mall. That's all.
Thanks, Teresa. And that's a very valid comment. It's interesting you brought that up. I was actually doing a water audit of a strip mall last Monday. So, and yes, it had 2 restaurants, a grocery, a barber shop, all on the same meter, so, and it wasn't split between irrigation and potable, which would have been even better. So yes, it's a valid point. And any and all comments are definitely welcome and helpful. And we appreciated the comments from Aqua. And if you have any examples or thoughts or comments, that's what we're trying to gather. We've actually gotten very few. So the more examples, the stronger we can make the white paper, right? We just kind of gave out ideas of the outline, but if people have examples of strip malls or meters or anything, the more you give us, the more we're able to put into that, paper that then goes to DWR, that then goes to the state board. So, yeah. Oh, and it looks like we have another raised hand, but thank you for your comment, Teresa. That's valid. Elise from Escondido.
Hi, everyone. Yes.
Hi.
I just wanted to add to what Teresa said, that although we are a city, so we have access to business license updates and things like that, as well as we're part of the process that approves building permits. So we do see when businesses turn over. For most of our districts, some of our district is in the unincorporated county, so we don't have the same role there. But even seeing that information come across our desk, it changes so frequently, that even with that info, do we recalculate every 3 months or something? And it's happening all the time. I can think right now a florist is turning into a coffee shop. An oil lube change is turning into a coffee shop, lots of those, so even with a way to kind of track the data, like I said, business licenses, it's so variable and ever changing. So, and that's if you could even drill down within the shopping center, not all of them give you that additional, not all of them have that ability. Some of them are on 1 meter anyway. So there's a lot of the practicalities there. Even when I'll turn on my camera. Even when you do have access to that first level of data, business licenses, it still doesn't really take you anywhere helpful.
I hear you. These are all valid comments and concerns, and we've been in the field for 20 years, so we get it. We've also worked with data. We work with one agency, and they said, here, you do it. Take all of our data and you sort out where everything is. And yeah, I had 3 different data sources and they didn't line up. So I had the water agency billing data, I had the parcel data, and then I had Google pictures, and sometimes like it would get so bad that all 3 of them said it was something else, so I'm like, okay, well, what is it exactly? And so you're right. It obviously had been changing quite a bit. I do notice it tends to be a certain size business or kind of almost a certain, like a medium, kind of strip mall type businesses that seem to change the most. But yes, this is all valid, and we have lived this with you, and that's why we, kind of volunteered to help, with the paper, is just to combine everybody's ideas, just so that we could give them some practicality to, what we see. Or, at least I'm born and raised in California, and just seeing a lot of the dynamics of what's really truly in the field. And so we were kind of wanted to make sure that we were supporting everybody and hopefully coming up with something that's practical, because that both of those points are spot on. Things change, it's dynamic, you know, commercials can be fun, but it can be, you know, a little bit overwhelming, and everything in between. So we'll see where we land, but the more examples you can provide to DWR, the aqua letters, the data, the sample reports, the better. And we are still seeking, you know, more. We've, like I mentioned earlier, gotten very little. So anything and everything that you provide would be helpful, so that we can provide them to DWR, because we can say everything, but the more we have examples to back it up, the stronger the paper becomes. So yeah.
Michelle, this is Teresa again. I have one last question.
Sure.
So is there anything in there like a caveat? And I know that that CII was a little bit different because they understand that there's an economic impact to that. But like in the event we go through, God forbid, another pandemic or, you know, a depression where we have a period of time where we're looking for economic recovery, is there the potential for something being written in there it's like, okay, we're going to hold off on reporting, or we're not going to be as stringent, you know, for like my area, we're trying to bring breweries into this area. We have, you know, water's not too expensive up here, but some of the business owners, you know, the strip malls and even the chamber, they were like, well, are we going to bring people in only to tell them you can't use that water? And for them, it's an economic issue. And I'm just wondering if there's something in there that kind of says, in the event of, you know, clearly a pandemic, but something else that is an economic struggle or a hardship, that some of those BMPs might be less stringent or relaxed.
It's a really interesting idea. It's almost like what we talked about the variances a few minutes ago when Jessica had like the fire or the earthquake, you know, right? So it's just slightly different context, you know, on the business space. I haven't, everything's still in flux. So at this point, nothing's been set. So I would say it's a very interesting and valid point that we can bring back. And I know, Lisa, if you want to chime in, but
Sure.
Yeah, nothing officially yet, but that's a good idea. A good point.
So the way to think about very good question. The way to think about the CII sector as a whole is there's no quantitative limit. It's not inside the water use objective calculation. So you wouldn't be turning people away because there isn't water unless there's not water for the whole system, I would say. I mean, it's subject to your whole supply reliability, right? If you can answer that question, I guess so. I mean, I can't answer that question, but I can say for the water efficiency goals for your agency, you're not to be constrained or curtailed on the CII sector. It was specifically written out for exactly what you point out as the economic growth is not to be curtailed. So if you feel that constraint or you feel you're facing that constraint, then that's a good example we should bring up, and then figure out, you know, either the framing that would make it more feasible for you to feel assured that you can move forward. But it is what the request is that there's activity for water efficiency in that sector, hence surveys and water management plans and education incentives going on. You would need to share back, we are doing activity to help this sector be more water efficient, but we're not doing things that are directing any direct water use. And because CII is really hard, you could be much more efficient but do more productivity at the same time, and so you can't see it in the water use numbers, right? So that's, just think of it as I'll need to share back that I'll need to do something in the CII BMP space. And so we're looking for examples of what makes the most sense, like in your area, that you can give an example. We had some success with this and we want to continue to do it, is like the best story we can get. Right. So
I understand.
Yeah.
So you're saying as long as my wholesale supplier says we've got plenty of water,
Yeah,
we'll be good in CII.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah,
Well, then we're all set.
that's right.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, it's not meant to create economic hardship on our whole state, because don't forget, this is a whole state thing. So they specifically took the quantification of CII out because they didn't want there to be, as a result of this legislation, economic hardship on the state as a whole. you know, like if we have breweries or wineries or, you know, other things like that, they still want the economic productivity from that. So they don't want that to be harmed by saying, oh, well, we have to be so efficient, we can't have you anymore. So it's more being efficient with what we have and not wasteful, but not economic hardship as a result. Does that make sense? So that's
Yeah, so there's classification, who are your businesses? There's the BMPs that we're talking about with the white paper, what activities can you do? And then there's some CII dedicated meters. Can you quantify the outdoor water use in landscape for non-residential CII customers? And that is connected to the more the water use objective and the arable area, you know, calculations and things. So there is that's it in the CII sphere.
great. We've had some great dialogue. Any last questions before we move on? I want to make sure we have time for our workshops as well, but any last questions on CII? Best management practices, because the next part is a little bit of CII too. All right, seeing no more questions, we'll move on to Efren. Thank you for the feedback, by the way, and feedback's always welcome via email. You can give it to Elizabeth or Joni or directly email us and we'll be happy to take it. So thanks for the feedback. All right, Efren.
Thank you, Michelle. And next I will be presenting an overview of the California Irrigation Management Information System, also known as CIMIS. Next slide, please. So in part one, I will just go over an introduction and the history of CIMIS. I'll talk a little bit about the stations and the data. I'll cover some types of users and data and the data gaps. And then in part two, I'll talk about spatial CIMIS, and I'll cover data collection and processing, spatial ETO, and finally some ETO maps. Next slide, please. So CIMIS is a network of over 145 fully automated weather stations. I'm sure you've heard of them before. They collect weather data throughout California and provide weather data and estimates of reference evapotranspiration ETO to users. CIMIS has been helping agricultural growers and landscape supervisors and managers manage their water resources for a long time. CIMIS supplies the data that they use to help determine when to irrigate and how much water to apply. Efficient use of water resources, of course, benefits everybody in California. It saves water and therefore it can also save energy. There's also 96 or so inactive stations that are not gathering data anymore, but you can still download information from them and use that for some historical data. Next slide, please. So CIMIS, what it does is it calculates an estimate of grass reference evapotranspiration, the loss of water to the atmosphere by the combined process of evaporation from the soil or the plant surfaces, and then transpiration from the plant tissues. It's an indicator of how much water your crops need, or your lawn, your garden, your trees, right? We have a lot of ag customers in our service area, and it's needed for healthy growth and productivity. But really, it is a science to manage how much water your plants need, and CIMIS is a great tool for that. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick overview of how CIMIS was started. It was developed in 1982 by DWR and UC Davis, and then DWR took responsibility for it in 85. And then in 2009, the spatial CIMIS was released. That's the data that I'll get more into later, but in 2002, it became available on the website for the public to download and to view. So if you love that type of data, it's very great to learn about it. Later in the presentation, I'll cover how you can create an account and access that data by visiting the CIMIS website. Next slide, please. This is just a really nice picture of a typical CIMIS station. It has all the different components. If you want to learn more about them, you have the solar panel at the bottom there, and then you have measurements for temperature, wind, and so on. Next slide, please. So some of the stations are owned by DWR. A lot of them are also owned and operated by local water agencies, universities for research purposes, cities, reclamation. So they're owned by very different group of the sector. Next slide, please. So the CIMIS stations, they measure data and includes, like I said, it measures temperature, humidity, solar radiation, wind speed. It does record wind direction, precipitation, soil temperatures. So they're great recorders of this type of data that we need. Next slide, please. You know, CIMIS works by using the data loggers. They pull the sensors every minute. You can get 60 minute by minute readings that are average and then total. You get the daily maximum, minimum and average, total values. They're calculated, you know, each day. And the data does go through some QC, and then eventually the ETO is calculated. CIMIS servers call the station every hour and they retrieve this data in a CDS format. Next slide, please. So the CIMIS users, you know, it has a lot of different users for the data. You have growers, obviously they rely on this. You have water agencies, you have other public agencies, even homeowners who are really into water management. You know, if you have some fruit trees, you need to know how much and when to water. Firefighters also use it. They use the data for obviously irrigation scheduling, but you can also measure air quality with it. Firefighters use it to predict or fight fires, and you have, you know, energy generation. It's great for weather forecasting and even pest management. So, you know, it's one of the practices of horticulture and, you know, for research purposes. Next slide, please. As I said earlier, you know, the benefits of using the CIMIS data, it helps to save water and energy. It does help mitigate, you know, impacts of drought or climate change. And ultimately it helps improve the environment if you use it correctly. Next slide, please. So spatial CIMIS, what it does is it combines remotely sent data from the GO satellite with point measurements from CIMIS stations, and then it estimates the ETO. So you have the data from the CIMIS stations, but also you're pulling weather data from the GO satellite. You know, and it provides daily maps of the ETO at a 2-kilometer grid. And because California has such a diverse landmass and really diverse climate from north to south, central, you know, into the mountains, many locations within the state, they lack a representative CIMIS station. And, you know, CIMIS and USBR, they partnered, or not USBR, DWR partnered with UC Davis to help explore potential for using this remote sense data to get an estimation of ETO, and it can be very accurate. And that's how these satellites help CIMIS get the spatial data. Next slide, please. So this is a map that I just downloaded from the CIMIS website. It shows the stations that are around the county. You know, we have station 173, number 10, 147, 184, and 153. So we have a pretty good amount of stations here in San Diego County. Next slide, please. So now I'll get to how you can use CIMIS. So you go to the website. It does require you to create an account. It's free. You click and log in, and you click register, and you fill out your information. It can be personal or it can be your work. It doesn't matter. You should explore the page to get an overview of the website. Read all about the site. You know, it has some pretty good information. It's not a lot, but it's very accurate, and it can help you decide what it can and it can't do. You can see the list of stations. Again, you need to be logged in once you create your report to be able to download, you know, hourly data, daily ETO, monthly ETO. You know, it downloads in an XML, which is wonderful for apps if you have apps that need the data. It also downloads in a CSV format, which are Excel values, and then can also download regular web reports that can show up on your computer. I did some of them this morning. It was really easy. And you can select a range of days, and you can see hourly data. Next slide, please. And then to have access to this spatial data, you just log on, you can type in a zip code, or you can do an address, and then a coordinates list will be created. This generates a report for you to use for your service area, and you can download different types of reports. If you don't want to use CIMIS, there are other types of services you can use. Cal Poly has a good website. The US Bureau has a great website, even the EPA. So there's other forms of ways that you can access your ETO, but CIMIS is a great way to do it. You know, we can get more into details if you'd like. I can do a more in-depth JPEG presentation if you'd like, but that concludes my CIMIS presentation just for the sake of time. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Great. Thank you, Efren. Do we have any questions on CIMIS at this time? All right, so I don't hear any or see any raised hands, so we can move on to the next segment of our workshop, which is to do some hands-on with the water use objective Excel tool. Next slide, please. So I'm going to give a really quick overview. You may have seen an introduction to this tool in our previous workshop, but today we are hoping to have a little bit of time to work together in small groups to kind of start thinking about calculating this. Everything, like I mentioned earlier, is very much draft. Okay, so this is not going to be, this is my objective for sure. It's just trying to start quantifying things and being able to kind of own kind of what this might start looking like, realizing that there's a lot of different numbers that are very much in flux and not nailed down, but it isn't too soon to start thinking about kind of what is this going to become, you know, as some of these numbers are adapted and made into standards. So we do have Nate's email here. He's not able to join us today, but we are here and going to be working with you in the breakout rooms. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen in just a moment, but if you have any questions, you can email Nate directly and or ask us, and then we can feed the questions back to Nate. We did talk to him today. He's actually presenting right now. So there's two different meetings going on at the same time, but we're really excited to kind of go over it. So there's the kind of, as kind of the end of like all these workshops, you know, we've been kind of talking about all the topics one by one. We've been talking about residential. That is the top row. That is the one that's the most quantified at this time. The next segment, you know, kind of is a little bit in flux still, dedicated irrigation accounts. You may or may not have that information. So my message back to you is if you don't have information at this time, you can leave it blank and just focus on the rows and the areas that you do have. Same with water loss. The standard is not finalized, as Elizabeth mentioned, but we do still have some areas and some numbers that you can look at. And same, then you kind of add everything up. Per our conversation just a few minutes ago, you'll notice that CII isn't on here, and that's specifically been excluded other than the irrigation portion. Per our discussion earlier, that will be more best management practice and activity based than actually quantified in your objective. So what we're going to do now is spend a little bit of time with this tool. It's been shared out for your use. Again, it's just supposed to be a simple calculator to kind of think about the concepts. And so we're going to hopefully work through some of that. Next slide, please. So again, the very first area that we're going to spend some time with probably in each of our groups is going to be the residential portion, because that one's the furthest along. You can either use DWR data or your own agency data, and we'll kind of be walking through that. So we have two different areas. The top area on the left is if you're going to do your own agency data, and then the yellow boxes are things that you can fill in from DWR. So the light shaded areas are if you have your own, and if you've done your own homework, the light yellow are for you. If not, the bold yellow areas are what you're going to be filling in. And then the rest of the tool is, you know, kind of calculations based on those. So the name of the game today is fill in the bright yellow box. If the bright yellow box doesn't make sense, let us know. We have data sources for all of those. We can show you where to get that data. Luckily, we just finished the urban water management plans, and that's going to be a big portion of where we're going to pull some of this information from, but we will be walking through that with you. Next slide, please. So I am going to share my screen just briefly, and I am going to share with you a tool live. So again, it's Excel based. You should have a copy of this. If you don't have a copy of it, let us know, and Joni can email you another copy, but you should theoretically have a copy of this tool. It's Excel based. This version is populated with data. The version that you have is blank. This is been provided by Nate just as a draft for everyone to use. But again, your agency data would be different. I just wanted to share you a version that actually had data in it versus all blank cells. So again, this is information that would have been either done by your agency and or if you got data provided by DWR. So we are going to, if you don't know this information or don't have it, then breakout room number 1 is probably for you, but we will be going over this section. The next section is dedicated irrigation accounts. You may or may not have that information. If you don't, again, we'll leave it blank. If you do, we'll show you how to input that. And then we have some defaults. So you can see I have some kind of little red notes in here. That's DWR table 4.1 can help you with your water use. That's where you can get this information. Note that the units are in acre feet. That's very important. So if you did your plan in million gallons, you might have to do a little math in there, but the tool has been set up very simply and not, you know, his system had acre feet. So if it isn't, you're going to need to do a little bit of conversion. Same thing, if in your water loss workbook, we can work through this. If you don't have 5 years worth of data, you can just use 2020 data. That is fine. And you should also have that in your water management plan, and or you can go get it from your water loss workbook in Excel. We can also show you that, and the number of connections. So again, the bright yellow. So this can come from your water management plan because that was required. The water loss workbooks were required for your water management plan, or from the Excel file. This cell over here, so it could come from your DWR letters and emails. If you're not familiar, join breakout group number 1. ETO inches, a default would be around 50, you know, for your area. His happens to be 53.96. I do have a backup table if you're interested, that has information kind of by region and by city and area. We can share that out. And then again, default rainfall might be 12 inches. You know, these are defaults, but again, use, you know, whatever specific to your area. But for now, and just for math and for our discussions, you can put those as defaults and then refine them. If you want to refine it a little bit, if you're coastal, maybe it's 45-ish. If you're interior, it might be 55. And then if you're hot, you might be all the way up to 60. Maybe that would be your ET. So you can plug those in just for defaults. Again, be area specific, but if you want some numbers just to use for our hands-on workshop, that might help you. And then also your water management plan, DWR table 3.1 should be your population data. So that's kind of just a quick overview of where you can get some of this. And then also this one down here, some of these are what Nate says, areas that you can modify, AKA if you want to do some sensitivity analysis, well, what if it's higher, what if it's lower, what does it look like? This is a tool for that. So obviously these are just very simple, basic formulas, and they can be, you know, you can see the impact. Well, what if it's 0.5 or what if this is 0.7? You know, what does that do for me? And then that can kind of give you an idea of, you know, how the tool is working. But so that's kind of just an overview. Again, residential at the top, dedicated irrigation, water loss, and then a total. And then you can kind of see the percent of the budgets here and how you're doing. Again, approximate, but it will give you an idea. And the whole goal is to see how are you doing? Are you making it? Are you not making it? And then if so, which one's high or low? And then maybe you spend some time and focus your energies there, if it makes sense or is feasible for you. Okay, so I'm going to keep it short and sweet. I'm going to keep it there. If you have detailed questions, you can pick a room. We're going to go ahead and open up the breakout rooms. We do have, right now you're all unassigned, but you can go ahead and choose a room. And then again, breakout room number 1 is if you want to help getting all this data and finding out where it is. Breakout number 2 is you've got the data, you're ready to start putting it in, but you just kind of want a little help with the tool. Breakout number 3 is you've already got the data and you're putting it in and you want to kind of discuss the results with other people who've already run the tool. So you're welcome to go ahead and pick a room, and I hope to see you there. And then we will come back and do a share out after we've had some time to work with the tools. So I hope you join us in the breakout rooms, and then we'll see you back here afterwards, and we'll have a wrap up and a share out. where everything went. We got really, really close to getting all the way through in group 2 to our tool. And we had a volunteer and she was doing it live. It was lovely. So Julia, how was that experience? And did you feel like you've got a good idea of how to get all the data in? Oh, you're on mute. Bottom left button. You can unmute yourself.
Back. I was
There
just
you go.
saying that it was a lot less intimidating than I thought it would be. So it was better than I anticipated.
Great. Yes, it was lovely to have a volunteer. So she was doing it live and she had all of her data, and we, a couple areas she was going to look up more info, but it was great. Well, thank you for being a volunteer. So group 2, we got mostly the way through it and had some good questions and dialogue. Any questions from group 2? And then so that's my share out, is that group 2 made it through. We had data and we made it through the tool. So we started getting some numbers out. So how about group 1? I think that was Nikki and Jessica. How'd you guys do?
We did really well. So sorry, we forgot to designate a person to report out, but what we did is we just went through each of the data points and made sure that we all understood, what their relevance was and where we can find that information. And we got some good feedback. I don't know if anyone else wants to share anything from the group, but so far we got good feedback as far as giving people the confidence to get started on their report on this spreadsheet.
Great. Anyone else from group 1 want to share? And we also recorded the other group. So if you're ready for like level 2, we can also watch the recording of, okay, now what do I do with my data? And then you can watch Julia and have her put it in. So that's why we also kind of tried to record the different breakout rooms too. So anyone else from group 1 want to share out the experience and if it worked for you? That was kind of our brainstorm to do the 3 different levels. And was that helpful for you?
I think it was helpful. I'm ready to start now.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Good to hear. So
It
We'll
was
have-
helpful. Yeah. I had a couple of blanks and that was able to fill them in. So that helped.
excellent. Good. Well, I'm glad it was helpful. It sounds like you had some good dialogue in group 1. Anyone else from group 1 want to chime in? Okay. So then we had Efren and Elizabeth in group 3, and they were I have my data. Oh yeah, so we forgot to label the group. So group 1 was we were looking for data. Group 2 was we have the data, but we hadn't put it in the model. And group 3 was we had the data and put it in the model. So Elizabeth or Efren, do you have a designated person or do you want to give a share out?
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and share out. We forgot to designate a person. So
Fine.
so everyone in our group had already run the models. We kind of just went through and went through any questions that anyone had on it and talked about results and areas of concern and kind of next steps. I mean, we kind of touched on things like the total reuse credit and how water loss fits in there, and then and other things like that. So anyone else from our group want to touch on anything?
So I'm curious to know, curious minds want to know, how were they doing? Were they like over? Were they under? Like how was it looking?
Most were looking pretty good. I think everyone that spoke up was looking good, and but we kind of had a range. Some were way under, some were close to it. So that's good too. That's what I would expect to kind of see too. That it's going to be a different range across the area.
Great. And did they use 2020 data to put the information in mostly? Or did they use like an average of a couple years, or, like for water loss, for example?
2020, I think, is what I don't think we really asked about what year they used. Yeah. So.
Okay. Yeah, I think a lot of people use 2020.
And some people we were able to put all of their water use in there, and they were still under the target, even comparing it to the residential target. So.
Oh, well, that's
Yeah.
good to hear. All right, anyone else from group 3? Want to chime in?
Hi, this is Jeannie from Lakeside. I kind of wanted to add that when I first looked at the spreadsheet, it didn't really seem too hard to get through, but it kind of reminded me of, do you remember back in the day, 15, 20 years ago, we used to do the water loss spreadsheet, and it was just part of the CUWCC BMP.
Yes.
There was no other requirement. We just filled it out. But I think what happened is the state looked at them and they were very non-comparable. They weren't apples for apples. So then it became, you have to be certified to fill in the worksheet. And then they got a little closer. But now you have to be I forgot what it's called, a validated auditor to submit it now. So what my point is we started with a simple spreadsheet. And as we went through, it wasn't as simple as we all thought because everybody's looking at it from a different perspective. So it became more training and more validation and more certification. And I see that maybe happening with this. It reminds me of the same thing. I just wanted to say that we're probably going to be seeing this worksheet for a long time.
Yeah, well, just a reminder, this worksheet is unofficial. This has just been put together by Nate Adams. It's just to be helpful, just to start getting the data available, just to be able to kind of start owning the numbers. This is not a DWR tool. They probably will come up with something at some point, or I'm not sure, or if they're just going to give you the budget and then it's up to you guys to figure out how to get it done. But at least it starts getting the numbers out, and or if they just give you one number and say, here's your budget, at least it will help you guys figure out, okay, great. What does that mean? And how do I potentially decide, if I agree or don't agree, or, and or be able to check, what they're giving you. So it's just an informal back of the envelope tool for now. And then as things come out, but it's a good time to, kind of do that back of the envelope and say, hey, am I like close, not close? How do I find the data? What data do I need? So that's kind of the point. But this is, Jean, to your point, just unofficial, but it'll be interesting to see what they come out with. If it's something similar or something different. So yeah, or nothing, and just give us budget, and then it's up to us to figure it out. So that's still the TBD as well. All right, any other questions? I did hear a potable reuse question in my group. So maybe I can throw out one last question and then we can wrap up. I did hear a potable reuse question from group 2, and they said, oh, well, what counts as potable reuse? Does someone from group number 3 want to say, or does, there was 2 potable reuse people in my group. Do you want to ask your question? And then the group can chime in. Oh, I can see you talking, but you're on mute. I see you, Chris. You're talking.
So I'm sorry.
There you go. Go ahead, ask your question.
So we produce recycled water, but we in turn like sell it to the city of Carlsbad and sell it to a Livenhain. So we don't have our own real distribution system, but we still produce it. So I'm not clear on whether we get credit for that or not.
I actually heard that from our group as well. And that's the first I've heard of that question. I will tell you that they're not keen on using, they're not going to be generous with this credit. So yeah, so I'll forward that to DWR and kind of get their feeling on it, and then I'll let you know.
Super.
Yeah.
I have the feeling the rats won't give us any credit for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a good question. It came up twice in my group. So it sounds like we got a live one. Hey, we got something out of the breakout. So we got a live question. So yeah, and then we can share that back out to the group. All right, any other questions, or we're pretty much right at time. I hope you liked the breakout rooms and liked that experience. You guys can do a thumbs up on the screen if you liked it and you found it helpful. So I see a lot of thumbs up, so that's cool. You can also do reactions. Oh, I'm seeing lots of thumbs up. That's cool. I'm glad. Yeah, we were kind of trying to figure out, like, would this be useful? So, oh, good. I see lots of thumbs up. That makes me happy. Yeah, we brainstormed a useful exercise. So thank you for all the feedback and for coming today. And if you have additional questions or feedback, you're welcome to email Nate directly, or you can email anyone on this team, Elizabeth, Efren, myself, Joni, and we can try and get you the answer to your questions. And with that, I'll turn it over to Elizabeth, and she can do a final last wrap up. But again, thanks for joining today.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming, and we were glad you all could attend. And I think we got a lot of really good feedback today, and that's really useful. The Water Authority is participating in all of AQUA's work groups and all of DWR's work groups, and we're working with CUA and others, and so any information and feedback we can get back from you guys is useful, and we do pass that on, and we make sure that it gets into comment letters and things like that. And I think the more we can get into like an even bigger comment letter, I think it's more impactful. I did want to say I've heard a comment on the variances, like, if your variants stack up and you have 3 variances and altogether they impact your water, your target by 10%, how does that work? Can you add up the thresholds or things like that? So we've heard those comments, and we are going to pass them. We are passing them on to Aqua in those work groups and to DWR. So any feedback you have, any great ideas you have, any commercial, industrial, institutional BMPs you think would be great to make as a requirement or a suggestion, those would be great.
Perfect. All right, with that, we will share out the recordings too. So again, if you were in group 1 and ready for group 2, or you kind of want to see what happened in group 3, we'll try and share out the recordings, and you can watch some of, the other dialogues, and hopefully that's helpful for you. With that, thanks for coming, and more to come.
Thank
Thank you.
You all have a great afternoon.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.